everyone, and welcome back to another Ableton tutorial. It is lovely to have you here. Big shout out to the YouTube gang. Big shout out to the Patreon gang. As ever, it is these awesome folks supporting on Patreon that make these videos possible. It is because of these people on the screen right now that we are here today. So a huge shout out to the support over on Patreon. It really, really means a lot. Right, let's get stuck into it today. So, you read the title on this video, Spectral Self Modulation using vocoder. It sounds complicated. It's not. But let's take a look at what's going on. So I'm going to press stop on all of these. And what you just heard there, I started with these three samples. One of them is a drum loop from a sample pack. One of them is my dear friend Miko playing some cello from a piece I wrote called On Embodying. That was for Skånes Dance Theatre for a work I did with them. And the third of those samples was just some rain on the window. It's pretty rainy here in Utrecht at the moment. So yeah, I thought why not record some of that. And then that turned into this. And this is all just using the same technique of spectral self-modulation, I'm going to call it that, on those three samples. And we end up with this completely different sonic atmosphere, completely different results. So I wanted to spend a bit of time today talking about vocoders, talking about how vocoders work, what they do, and then how we can get to these kind of places with them. So the vocoder was invented sometime in, I think, 1938. It was invented as a way of synthesizing speech, not to be used in any musical context, but just to sort of, synthesize speech. It was then used in early telecommunications as it was a way of transmitting a hell of a lot more data. Transmitting the full audio took up a lot of bandwidth. Transmitting vocoded signals took up a lot of less bandwidth. So it then became used in musical applications, and yeah, we get all sorts of cool stuff with it. So I thought, let's start today by looking at how we traditionally use vocoders, and through doing that, we're going to look at exactly how vocoders work and then how we could use that knowledge to explore different results. I often talk about inspiration on this channel, and I think for me, inspiration often comes from thinking about ways of using things in which they were not intended. I don't think a vocoder was intended to do this to drums, but I kind of like what it does. So let's understand what vocoders do, and then let's look at ways in which we can explore that, take it in new directions. So I prepared two little things as well. I have a little sample of some speech. Maybe I'm going to turn that down. It's from an old movie.
Of course, we can't spend all our time at home.
It sounds like an old movie. And I've prepared one little synthesizer thing. It's playing two chords, and it sounds like this. Obviously, I spent a lot of time on that. It's just so we can look at what a vocoder actually does. So a vocoder needs two signals. It needs a modulator signal and it needs a carrier signal. And we usually bring the vocoder into the signal, onto the channel that's doing the modulating. So I'm going to drag a wavetable onto the modulating signal, which is going to be the voice. I'm going to drag that on here. Did that work? No, it did not. Why did that not work? Oh, I'm trying to drag a wavetable, not a vocoder. Let's drag the vocoder onto here. So what will now happen when I press play on this, the vocoder is going to analyze the incoming signal. The incoming signal is the modulator signal. It's going to split that signal up into a number of bands. Here it is splitting it up into 20 bands, and these can go all the way up to 40, all the way down to 4. And with each of those bands, these are frequency bands, by the way, it's analyzing the volume of each of those individual frequency bands and creating a bandpass filter. That modulating bandpass filter is now used to modulate the carrier signal. So the carrier signal is then put through the same series of bandpass filters, 20 bandpass filters in this case, and the volumes adjusted accordingly. So we get the impression of the sort of EQ spectrum, EQ makeup, bandpass frequency makeup of the modulating signal, and that modulates the full sound of the carrier signal. So at the moment, the carrier here is set to noise. So we're just going to get a whole bunch of noise, but the volumes of each of the 20 bands on that noise are going to be controlled by the modulating signal, by the voice.
Of course, we can't spend all our time at home.
So we get these kind of demonic sounds. So the way we usually use a vocoder is to use something like a synthesizer as the carrier signal, so that the band passes of the voice are going to modulate the individual frequency bands on the synthesizer. So to do that, I would come here and change from noise to external. I select audio input from the wavetable. On the wavetable channel, I'm going to send the audio to send only, which means it's not going to come out of the master. And now we need to have both of these two things playing in order to hear anything. So if I just press play on this, we can see all the band passes going. This is the individual volumes of these 20 bands on the modulator signal. But because there is no carrier signal coming in, we're not hearing anything. But as soon as I press play on our carrier signal on this synthesizer, and you can hear, I'm going to turn that down a little bit. And so you can hear the individual bands, these 20 bands of the carrier signal of the synthesizer being modulated by the volumes of these 20 bands from the modulator signal, in this case, the voice. Let's press stop on both of those. So that is essentially how a vocoder works. So let's look at how we can take that in different directions. So on this drums channel, I'm going to bring in a vocoder over here. And I'm going to press play on this. And we get that white noise again being modulated by the modulator signal, which is in this case the drums. I'm going to change the carrier signal to be itself, to be the modulator. So now the volumes of the individual bands on the modulating signal are going to modulate the loudness of those bands on the carrier signal, which in this case is also the modulator. So if I press play on this, it's just going to sound like, to begin with, a slightly murky version of itself. So I turn the vocoder off. To begin with, it just sounds like a slightly murky version of itself. We can press enhance to bring out some more stuff, but this perhaps is not so interesting for us. It's pretty easy to get audio sounding like murkier versions of itself. But we have all these extra controls here. We can control the range of the spectrum, so we can get, only the high pass, the higher frequencies come through, or we can go right down low as well. We can control the bandwidth of each of these individual bands. At the moment, it's set to 100%, which is why we're sort of pretty much hearing the whole frequency spectrum. But if I bring this down, we start hearing individual notes, which is super cool. Now, we can also gate each of these. So if I bring the gate up, and I think you can already see where we're heading with this. We have attack and release on each of these sounds as well. So if I turn the release right up, the attack up even as well. Yeah, I kind of like it like this. Now the depth here is controlling the depth of the modulating signal, the amplitude of the modulating signals on the output of the modulated carrier signals. So set to 100%, it's sort of giving a reasonably straight, reasonably dry, reasonably clean replica of the volumes. If I bring this all the way down, we can hear that that's not the case, or we can enhance that. And the other thing that's interesting to us here is also the formant. So in this case, this is going to act kind of a bit like a pitch control. So if I bring the formant down, we can hear that that's functioning kind of like a pitch shifter. Now, things get really interesting when we start playing with the number of bands as well. If we bring the number of bands right down to, say, 4, we can get some super interesting sounds. We can bring the bandwidth up a bit more, we get a bit more, and then we can sort of mix this with the dry signal as well, and then we get some really interesting sounds, like just a little bit distorted sounds. Let's turn this up to something like 8. Let's bring the formant down. Let's bring the bandwidth right down again. Actually, let's make this 12. There we go. And we can find these super sweet spots with the formant. Maybe bring the release down a bit on this. This is super nice. I'm going to add a limiter after that. Where's it gone? Limiter. And just to make sure we chop off any crazy peaks. Let's maybe add a drum bus after that. Nice. Transients bit back in. Super cool. And we have this unvoiced thing here. So what this does on a traditional vocoder is it lets all the sibilance through, all of the these kind of sounds. So this is going to let through a little bit of the transients, I think. This is kind of fun. Bring that back a bit. Gonna put the limiter at the end after the drum bass actually. There, that's a bit better. This is super nice. Maybe it's nice to also sort of... Yeah, maybe it's nice to modulate this gate a little bit. So let's do that with an LFO. Let's bring in an LFO. We're going to set it, yeah, let's set it to random. Let's make it quite small, like, yeah, something like 15%, and just modulate that gate here. It's going a bit too much, let's make it 10. We could also do something cool, like maybe modulate the decay, so let's map that to here. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Let's make this change on the bar. 2 bars. Yeah, super fun. Okay. Now let's take a look at this cello sound, and let's do exactly the same thing. So we press play on this. I'm gonna drag in a vocoder. It's gonna sound like white noise, sorry. Sorry. Switch this to modulator. Let's again bring the bandwidth right the way down. Nice, okay. Bring the formant down a bit. Bands to 16. Let's give it a bit more gain on the way in, I think. Let's use a utility and a limiter on the way in to sort of make the signal a bit more consistent. Bring the ceiling all the way down. Turn the gain up. Let's gate these. Nice. Okay, a bit more release. Going to use an OTT after this. It's giving me, like, I feel like that's going to really help the overall quality of the sound. Let's bring an EQ in because we're getting some super resonant stuff happening. And I just want to drag that down a little bit in here. Bring the bands down. Gate up a little bit higher. A little bit more attack. Oh, bands back up. Formant's down too low now. Let's adjust the depth here. Super nice. Bit more attack, I think. Bit more release. Formant. Yeah, this is really nice. Let's bring this down and the range right way up. Actually, on the drums, I want to bring that range. Oh, it already was down. It already was down. Okay, this is nice. Let's give it a bit more gain out of the OTT. Let's take a little bit of the low end off here. A little bit higher on the gate. Do we want any unvoiced? No. Maybe bring this formant back down. There we go. Getting some really nice resonances. How do these sound together? Super nice. Let's sidechain it. Let's sidechain that against the sort of drums one. So let's bring a compressor in on here. Let's sidechain that against the drums. So that's the second drums channel. Bit more release. Really nice. Okay, let's press stop on both of those. Let's focus on this rain sound. So we've got some rain here. Let's do the same thing. So vocoder. Noisy rain. Let's change this to modulator. Let's bring the bandwidth all the way down. Already this is super nice. Let's bring loads of bands. Let's turn the formant up. Lots of release. Unvoiced? Maybe that's going to be nice here. Oh, this is nice. Ah, this is really nice. This, we can bring the range. More top end. Let's use a line delay to sort of split this signal a little bit, make it nice and stereo. Really nice. There's a funny frequency in these drums. I just want to take out a little bit. Audio effects, EQ. Let's put that in here. In here a little bit. Yeah, that's a bit. And then simply adjusting the number of bands, we get super different results. Underformant. We can adjust the formant over here. Where's it gone? Where's it gone? Back over here. Actually, maybe let's focus these then somewhere in here. Really nice. So there you go. Some spectral self-modulating stuff using a vocoder. Hope you learned a little bit today about how vocoders work, and well, I hope you got inspired to sort of try some new stuff with vocoders yourself. Thanks for being here. See you next time.